More than normal?
Okay, let me start with a couple of general updates. I hope everyone had a happy Halloween. I think Seabase is more or less correct from now till the end of the course. There are still a few issues. So there are sort of special days, as it were. This Friday, Dr. Kusin from the dental school will be talking about anesthesia. It'll be normal time, and then we'll go into sec. But he'll be giving the lecture. Fridays are the big days. The next Friday, the 11th, you have something in molecular foundations of medicine in the afternoon from 12 till 2:30 or 3. So their lecture will be at 10 o'clock, which it doesn't say that on the schedule because I didn't have permission, but I just got permission from Dr. Canella to actually write that on the Seabase schedule. So there'll be no lab that day, obviously, but there'll be a lecture, I think, on lymphatics at 10 o'clock. And I think it will be here, but I have to check if I can get this room. But I'll update that on Seabase as soon as I have a chance. The following Monday, you have their final exam, I believe, the 14th, so we will not have a class that day. In fact, I think from then on, it's all reviews. 16th is a review, and the 18th, which is the following Friday, will be a review day, but I'm not sure if it's listed on Seabase yet. And then your exam will be the following Monday, the 21st. And then the 22nd, Dr. Kusin will come back to teach you how to pull teeth. So volunteers for having your teeth pulled. If not, you'll have to use the cadavers. I think that he wanted to do that at like 12 o'clock or something like that. I forget, but I think your other classes are gone, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. So today we're still moving through our cranial nerves, and we're down to 9, 10, 11, and 12 plus sympathetics just for good measure. And some of these are very difficult, some of them are not. Okay. So, no great surprise. The organization of the lecture follows the title. We do cranial nerve 9, cranial nerve 10, the vagus, cranial nerve 11, spinal accessory, cranial nerve 12, hypoglossal, and finally just a brief discussion of sympathetics of the head, which are vastly simpler than sympathetics of the rest of the body. Okay, cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal, has a long and difficult name, and it's an absurdly complicated cranial nerve. Okay, here it is. Where is it? Somewhere down here. Somewhere down here. Here it is, down over here, right? It comes out. Comes out right here next to vagus, and one of the reasons it's in today's lecture is you will get a chance to actually see it coming out of the base of the skull through the jugular foramen. So here's from the Okay. So right here's the inside of the skull. Here it is with the posterior cranial fossa. Here's with dura intact, and there's your jugular foramen. And there's 9, 10, and 11. Okay. So it comes out through the jugular foramen. There's reportedly coming through the jugular foramen, and it has a bunch of branches that do a great variety of things. Okay. There's a branch that goes to this little muscle here, the stylopharyngeus, somatic motor, and you will see the stylopharyngeus today in dissection, and you will see the glossopharyngeal nerve lying right on top of it. There is a tympanic branch which heads up back here through the temporal bone in a remarkably complicated pathway, which provides general sensory to the middle ear, the mastoid air cells, and the eustachian tube, and also managed to get some parasympathetics to the parotid gland through a small little nerve, a branch of this one, and which goes to the otic ganglion and then jumps on the auriculotemporal nerve and then takes parasympathetics to the parotid gland. There's a fairly simple branch going down here to the pharynx, general sensory to the pharynx, so just going back down into here. Then there is our lingual and palatine branches. So there's branches that go down through the back of the pharynx, and you can probably trace them. Go to the mucous membranes of the part of the pharynx that's behind the mouth, part of the palatine tonsil, the soft palate, which you'll learn about up here is the uvula, that dangly thing above the tongue, and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, just general sensory. Traveling with that is special sensory, taste, that innervates basically the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. So taste from the posterior third of the tongue comes back through the glossopharyngeum. Okay, then down here, there's a little branch over here that comes from this bifurcation between the external and internal carotid, and it brings visceral sensory from the carotid body, which is this little thing here that detects basically oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, and this carotid sinus, which is this little swelling at the base of the internal carotid, so it also senses blood pressure going up towards the brain. So these are all the bits of what the glossopharyngeal does and what the parts are. Now let's go through them one by one. Okay, this is the part you will see today. I'll give you a hint. What we're going to do today is we're going to separate the cranium and the lower jaw and the trachea and the esophagus from the vertebral column and all the muscles in front of it, and flip all of this visceral part forward. So you'll be looking into the back of the pharynx. And when you look into the back of the pharynx, you should be able to find this little stylopharyngeus muscle, and lying right on top of it will be part of the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, so here's a little more detail about this stylopharyngeus. As the name implies, it's one of these things that tells you where it goes from its name. It originates on the styloid process, which is that little thing that's sort of poking out in the back of the skull. It inserts on the posterior part of the thyroid cartilage down here, but it actually sort of disappears and merges into these muscles that form the back of the pharynx, known as the pharyngeal constrictors. So when you flip the skull forward, you'll see these muscles wrapping around 1, 2, 3, known as the pharyngeal constrictors, and then stylopharyngeus will sort of blend into them. Obviously, it originates way up here near the back of the skull and inserts down here into the neck. So when it contracts, it's going to raise the pharynx upwards to help with swallowing. And the whole point of it being in this lecture is it's innervated by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, so here's the pharynx from the back. This is what you will see when you pitch the head forward. There's a superior constrictor, a middle constrictor, and then a great big inferior constrictor that form. This is the back of your throat. So if you look way down your back, and your doctor says, you look behind the tongue, what you're looking at is the pharynx. This is from the back side, and then it sort of blends down here, stuff that goes into the back of your throat, obviously, mostly goes into the esophagus. So here's that little stylopharyngeus muscle coming down here on the side. Here's the glossopharyngeal nerve lying right on top of it. And that's the branch that's going to stylopharyngeus. And then there are other branches, which we'll talk about now. Okay, this is the confusing, messy one. The tympanic branch. So it's a little branch that branches off the glossopharyngeal about as soon as it gets out of the jugular foramen, and then it flips up into the temporal bone. Okay? It includes a variety of things. It includes general sensory. So it goes up into the temporal bone to the middle ear. So it's going up into the ear region. Okay, there's your external auditory meatus. It includes general sensory to the eustachian tube, which is that connection between the back of your throat and the middle ear. That's what they want you, that when you swallow when you're going up in an airplane, because the pressure is going down, but the pressure in your ear is not, and your ears start hurting. They give you candy so that you will swallow. So whenever you swallow, we'll learn about that in a little while. Whenever you swallow, it opens that tube between your mouth and the middle ear, so that the pressure becomes the same, and you don't have this big differential with all this high pressure in your ear and low pressure in the airplane, and your mouth and the air around you. Okay. It is, in addition to carrying general sensory to this sort of area around in and around the ear, it's carrying parasympathetics, okay, which are going to end up at the parotid gland via a fairly complicated pathway. So it's going to go into the ear region. It's going to go form this thing called the lesser petrosal nerve, which is going to go to the otic ganglion, which you might have seen when we went into the infratemporal fossa. Then it's like many of these parasympathetics, it's going to jump onto another nerve, the auriculotemporal nerve, a branch of V3, and then it's going to go into the parotid gland. Okay. So here's what the parasympathetic does. It's on number 9 as it comes out. Then it sends this tympanic branch, which is going into the middle ear via a little hole here in the back of the outside of the temporal bone, which you'll see in a minute. Travels through there. There's the tympanic cuniculus. There's a little hole. It comes out the jugular foramen and then dumps into the petrous portion of the temporal bone. Joins this area known as the tympanic plexus in the middle ear cavity. There's the middle ear cavity. Okay. There's the tympanic membrane, the eardrum. Right, that's all you're going to ever see of tensor tympani right there. Okay, so there's the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Hopefully we will dissect this region in a couple of weeks, and hopefully you'll get to see some of these. This will blow up. Okay, and then there's the tympanic plexus. Okay, then from there it comes out as a little nerve known as the lesser petrosal nerve, which is traveling through the middle cranial fossa, heading towards foramen ovale there, slides down through foramen ovale. Okay. There's another view showing the lesser petrosal nerve coming out of the plexus. Okay, and then it jumps onto the auriculotemporal nerve and goes into the parotid gland carrying parasympathetic fibers. Okay, so to summarize this pathway, The tympanic branch leaves the glossopharyngeal after just outside of the jugular foramen, re-enters through the tympanic caniculus, okay, dumping right up through there, and joins the tympanic plexus, which is this plexus of nerves that you saw sitting in there. It leaves the tympanic plexus and this middle ear region through the lesser petrosal nerve, okay, which goes through, has a little groove in the middle cranial fossa, leaves the middle cranial fossa along with where you see V3 in the foramen valley, goes into the otic ganglion, which is just the other side, the lower side of the lower side of foramen valley in the infratemporal fossa where we dissected, and where most of you probably, hopefully, saw the auriculotemporal nerve. Jumps onto the auriculotemporal nerve after it hits this ganglion, and then goes into the parotid gland. Okay. And then there's a fairly easy one, this little part that's coming down here and goes into the back of the pharynx, and it's carrying general sensory. So part of the general sensation in the back of your throat is carried by the pharyngeal branch. Okay, so here we have it all again. Here's your three constrictors, which you'll see today. There's going to the esophagus. There's your glossopharyngeal. Here's the part going into stylopharyngeus. Here's this general sensory pharyngeal part going back there. And then this part's going to go down into the tongue. Okay. The general sensory part that's going to the pharynx elicits the gag reflex. Okay, so that if you stick a pencil down your throat and touch the back of your pharynx, your pharynx will, there will be the reflex will, that sensation will go back to the vagus nerve, which will cause